Good morning, Life Church. My name's Weston and I'm your tech director here. We have a lot of stuff going on this week, so let me fill you in. Coming up soon is our church Sky Zone trip. It'll be $5 per person, $10 max per family, and as always, guests are free. Be sure to bring your own Sky Zone socks if you have them, and if you want to register and pre-sign the waiver, we have it at our Connect table here in person. We also have it on the events page on our website, as well as you can email lifekids@lifechurcharizona.com and just let us know who's coming and how many you plan on bringing total. Continuing our summer of fun, for next week's theme, we are doing tie-dye. If you might have gotten the opportunity to watch our YouTube video about our youth camp, you might have seen that we actually did tie-dye there. So a lot of kids have matching tie-dye shirts. It was super fun. I'm gonna be wearing mine in the booth. Go ahead and wear your tie-dye to show support for our youth program, and it's gonna be a blast. Along those same things, we are having a game night coming up on July 15th for all of our junior high and high school youth. It's going to be in our building in B3, and we're gonna have pizza and snacks all night long. This week, we are continuing our Summer of Compassion series as part of our BLESS acronym for the church, and we are continuing to bless our community and our neighbors as a church, showing our presence and loving on others. And as you can see, any of these items here on this poster would be more than wonderful to bring in. We are continuing to serve our community and do what Jesus did in his day and be a light into the world in a time of huge need. As you may have heard from one of us in person or any one of our social medias, we are switching to a live stream service this Sunday. Now we are going to be live streaming first service. It's going to start at 9:30 instead of 9, and it's going to appear as a YouTube premiere and a Facebook stream just as it has before, so there shouldn't be too much of a big change. Hopefully everything is going well so far, and I am super grateful to have the opportunity to continue to serve our online community through new and interesting methods. Well, that's all I have for you guys today. Would you please turn your attention to David and the team as they lead us in a time of worship this morning.
You will never leave. Your love sustaining me. Before I even knew what love was, you brought me here to rest, giving me space to breathe. So I'll stay still until it sinks in. And I will lean back in the loving arms of a beautiful Father. Breathe deep and know that He is good. He's a love like no other. Your love will never leave. Your love sustaining me. Before it sinks in. And I will lean back in the loving arms of a beautiful Father. I will breathe deep and know that He is good. He's a love like no other. And I will lean back in the loving arms of a beautiful Father. I will breathe deep and know that He is good. He's a love like no other. And now I can see your love is better than all the others that I've seen. And I'm breathing deep all of your goodness, your loving kindness to me. And now I can see your love is better than any other that I've seen. So I'm breathing deep all of your goodness, your loving kindness to me. And now I can see your love is better than all the others that I've seen. So I'm breathing deep all of your goodness, your loving kindness to me. And I will lean back in the loving arms of a beautiful Father. That is who you are. I will breathe deep and know that He is good. He's a love like no other. I will lean back in the loving arms of a beautiful Father. And I will breathe deep and know that He is good. He's a love like no other. I will lean back in the loving arms of a beautiful Father. In the darkness we were waiting, without hope, without light, till from heaven you came running. There was mercy in your eyes, to fulfill the law and prophets. To a virgin came the word, from a throne of endless glory to a cradle in the dirt. Praise the Father, praise the Son, praise the Spirit, three in one. God of glory, majesty, praise for his breath, till that stone was moved for good. For the Lamb had conquered death, and the dead rose from their tombs, and the angels stood in awe, for the souls of all who'd come to the Father are restored. And the church of Christ was born, then the Spirit lit the flame. Now the gospel truth of old shall not kneel, shall not fade. By his blood and in his name, in his freedom I am free. For the love of Jesus Christ, who has resurrected me. Praise the Father, praise the Son, praise the Spirit, three in one. God of glory, majesty, praise forever to the King of kings. Praise the Father, praise the Son, praise the Spirit, three in one. God of glory, majesty, praise forever to the King of kings.
Well, shalom and greetings to Life Church and Pastor Derek Hines. I want to just take this moment and thank you so much for your generosity and for the way that you have gotten involved in helping the refugees in Ukraine. We have workers in Ukraine, actually Ukrainians that have lived there all of their lives. We have people in Poland and also in Bulgaria and in Moldova. And we have been working since the beginning of this war to help those that are in great need. You know, the heart of God is to help the needy and the broken and those that can't help themselves. And that's what we've been doing. And your generosity has helped us to help these different folks that have come to us, mostly women. Men 18 years old to 60 years old have not been allowed to leave because they are the ones that are fighting this war against Russia. But those that have been coming, most of them had come without anything, without even the bare necessities of clothes or food or anything like that when they've crossed the borders. And our teams that have been able to help them. Your generosity has been amazing. In Bulgaria, for instance, where you've been very instrumental in helping there, we've helped over 10,000 people in the last 3 months in that place, and it's because of the generosity of Life Church. So I want to thank you. God bless you, and may the Lord return back your love that you have given. May it come back on you, and the prosperity rest on you as well. God bless you.
Well, good morning. This morning, I will share, I was talking with a few people out in the lobby before the service. This next week, I should know whether I'm going to be able to give a kidney or not, and so next week I'll let you know. On Wednesday, I'm hoping to hear, so we'll see. Now, we're in our 22nd week. It might actually be the 23rd week. I looked at it last week, and I'm like, I think I miscalculated. But anyway, we're at least in the 22nd week of our sermon series called Live, Love, and Share Jesus. And today we're looking at the story of Zacchaeus. And we're going to be in Luke chapter 19, verses 1 through 10. And so let's pray and we'll get right into it. God, thank you so much for bringing us into your presence today. Thank you for worship. Thank you for the opportunity to bring our hearts to you in prayer. God, I certainly thank you for both those things, because it's in worship that Lord, I get to encounter you in a fresh and a beautiful new way, and so does everybody else. And it's in prayer that we get to express our hearts to you, and you get to express your heart to us. And now, Lord, it's through your word that we get to know your mind. And so, Lord, teach us. Teach us so that we might have the same mind as you, the same heart as you, the same passions as you. And so, Lord, speak to us in this time. And all God's people said, Amen. Jericho in the land of Israel is a fertile oasis in the midst of a dry and hot desert. It's just like here. And there's an old story that says that one day, long ago, there were two men. They were tired from their journey and looking for water and rest, and they came to Jericho. As they approached the city, they saw in the distance an old sycamore tree, and they noticed, even in the midst of this oasis, that that tree was unusually green, and its branches were unusually full. And so they made their way towards it. As they did, they noticed an old man at the base of that tree holding a water pot in his hands. Curiously, they watched as this old man took that precious water and poured it out ever so carefully over the base of that tree. Needless to say, these tired and thirsty men were kind of confused by what they saw, and so they approached this old man and they said, "Sir, why are you giving that old tree such tender care?" And with that, the old man stopped and he turned, and with a gentle smile, he said, "Oh, I see you men are strangers to our town." And they said, "Yes, sir, we are." And with that, the old man pointed to an old limb that hung out over the road. And he said, "You see that old limb up there? You see that old limb?" And tears began to well up in his eyes. He said, "That's the place. That's the place I first saw my Lord. That's the place." And then old Zacchaeus told the story. The story he loved to tell, the story about the day he met Jesus. Friends, hear me, those men were probably not the first, and they certainly were not the last to hear that story. Because today, you and I are going to hear that story as it's recorded for us in the book of Luke. Now, let's get started by turning to Luke chapter 19, verse 1. It reads, Jesus entered Jericho. Stop right there. Jesus entered Jericho. As I mentioned earlier, Jericho was an oasis. It was a beautiful green gem in the midst of a brown sandy desert. And it was a place of attraction and of interest. It was a place where King Herod the Great and his sons built a beautiful, magnificent palace, a beautiful theater, and a hippodrome. That's right, a racehorse, so that they could enjoy their winters there. It was also a place that served as a hub for Roman trade routes. And on those trade routes, they carried dates and balsa and roses to worldwide fame. It was also a place that was wealthy beyond any in its region. As a matter of fact, Josephus, the Jewish historian of that day, called it a divine region, the fattest in all of Palestine, which is why it became known, especially among tax collectors, as a tax collector's paradise. Why? Because where there is great wealth, of course, there can be great taxes. And where there are great taxes, there can be great tax collectors. And so Jesus enters into Jericho, this wealthy gem of community, but it appears that he's not going to stay. He's not going to stay. No, verse 1 says he's passing through. He's passing through. Now, friends, that would have been a horrible, I'm telling you, terrible disappointment to the people of Jericho. You see, just hours before, Luke 18:35 and 36 says that Jesus came into town. As he came into town, those in Jericho rushed out to greet him. They rushed out to greet him. Why? Because that's how you greeted celebrities or other famous people who came into your town in that day. You would literally rush out to greet them. Sometimes you would literally run miles out of town to greet them. And then often, with praise and excitement, you and your community would gather around them, and then you would literally escort them back into town. And then you and your community would host a huge banquet to celebrate the arrival of this special guest. And so that you would gather there, and as you would gather with them, you would greet them and meet them and pay your respects to this honored guest. And then finally, as a community, you would pick out the perfect place for your guests to stay. You would pick out the perfect host for them to stay in, one that would truly honor your guest and also would honor your community. And so when Jesus arrives, everybody's excited. I mean, they're making plans, they're organizing banquets, they're spreading the word. They can't wait for this day to unfold. And so when they find out that Jesus is just passing through, and when they find out they're not even going to have the opportunity to give him a banquet or even host him, when they find that stuff out, they can't believe it. And they are greatly disappointed and greatly upset. What brings us to Zacchaeus, verse 2. As Jesus was passing through Jericho, a man was there by the name of Zacchaeus, who was what? He was the chief tax collector. The chief. And it says he was wealthy. Now, let's talk about tax collectors for a moment here. Tax collectors in that day, we talked about this last week, they were both hated and despised. Why? Because they're sellouts. They're sellouts. They sold out their country, they sell out their people, they sell out their God, they sell out their morals to the Roman oppressors. Why? For a buck. For money. Do you remember how those tax collectors of that day got their jobs in that area? They bought them. They actually paid the Roman oppressors for the opportunity to rip off their own people. You see, Israel was underneath Roman rule, right? In order to maintain Roman rule, Roman taxes had to be collected. And so when you paid your taxes, you were actually paying the salaries of your Roman oppressors. And because Rome only cared about their share of the profits, they allowed their tax collectors to rip you off at will, their will, just as long as the Romans got their cut. That's why everything a tax collector owned or even touched was considered to be unclean by Jewish law, because it was also considered to be stolen, ripped off. Which is why the Jews believed that lying to a tax collector, hear this, lying to a tax collector was right. It was good. It was even honoring to God. And friends, because of all that, the Jews hated taxes, they hated tax collectors, and they greatly hated Zacchaeus. Why? Because he was the greatest of all tax collectors. The chief of all tax collectors. Which means he literally stood at the top of the collection pyramid. And so he raked in money from all across the town from every single person. And since he stood at the top of this collection pyramid, he also stood at the top of everybody's hate list. And so Zacchaeus was enormously wealthy, but he also was enormously hated. Look at verses 3 and 4. It says that this enormously hated man wanted to see who Jesus was. But being a short man, he could not because of the crowd. And so he ran ahead and he climbed a sycamore fig tree to see him. Now, friends, Zacchaeus does two things here that no dignified man in that culture in that day would ever do. First, he runs. He runs. And second, he climbs a tree. Why does he do those things? Because he wants to see Jesus. He wants to see Jesus, and he'll do whatever it takes to get it done. Now, imagine the scene. Zacchaeus is seated in his seat of customs, which is in his tax office. All right, he's in his tax office. He's conducting the normal business of the day, which is ripping people off. And as he does, an excited friend or family member comes in. We don't know which. They come rushing into the office. And they say, Zacchaeus, Zacchaeus, you're not going to believe this, but Jesus of Nazareth has just healed blind Bartimaeus. Remember that old, filthy, dirty, blind beggar who's always sitting on the edge of town, blind Bartimaeus? Well, he's healed. He's healed. And now Jesus is passing through. Now, friends, keep in mind, this scene actually occurs 3 years into Jesus' ministry. 3 years. And so by this time, Zacchaeus, as well as many, many, many others, have heard the reports. They've heard how Jesus heals the sick and casts out demons and raises the dead. They hear how he's a friend of sinners and how he even forgives sin of his own authority. And so this is a man Zacchaeus desperately wants to see. And so he dismisses the Roman guard. He slips a few coins into his pocket, locks the door behind him, and then he begins to run to an old sycamore tree. Why? Why does he run? Because, friends, he needs to get ahead of the crowds. Why? Because the crowds for Zacchaeus are both dangerous and deadly. deadly. You see, in that day, there was an extreme group of freedom fighters, Jewish freedom fighters, called the Sicarii. The Sicarii. And the Sicarii means daggers. They were the daggers. And what they would do is enter into a crowd, identify their victims, preferably a tax collector, and then with a quick flick of their dagger, they would stick their victim in the back, and then like a vapor, they would disappear into the crowd before the victim's body even hit the ground. And so that's why Zacchaeus forsakes his dignity and runs ahead of the crowd and climbs a tree. Now, you know, friends, as a kid, I used to think, and many of you probably do too, that Zacchaeus climbs a tree simply because he's short, right? He's short and he wants to see Jesus, so he needs to see over the crowds, and so he climbs a tree. But hear this, that's not the only reason. It's not the only reason. Listen closely. He also climbs a tree because a tree was considered to be a type of tent of shade, if you would. And as a Phoenician, we all understand that, right? I mean, when you pull into a parking lot in the summer, what is the first thing you look for? A tree, right? A tree, a tent of shade, a tree. Friends, in Jesus' culture, a tree was considered a type of tent, and so that means that if any ceremonial uncleanliness took place underneath that tree, that tent, and if you actually stepped underneath any branch of that tree, that tent, then you would become ceremonially unclean. And so Zacchaeus chooses. He chooses to climb a tree because he knows that this crowd who's preparing for the Passover is not going to risk becoming unclean. Why? Because if they become unclean, then they can't celebrate the Passover with their family and friends. And so Zacchaeus climbs a tree knowing that this crowd won't walk underneath this tree or any tree, let alone a sycamore tree. Now, what's special about a sycamore tree? Well, they were huge. You can go there today, they're huge. As a matter of fact, they're so huge that Jewish law mandated that they couldn't grow within 75 feet of the edge of town. Why? So that no one would accidentally walk underneath one of their massive branches and possibly, therefore, become unclean. And so verse 4 tells us that Zacchaeus runs out of town ahead of the crowds and he climbs a sycamore tree to see Jesus. Now, friends, I don't know about you, but I can just see Zacchaeus as he crawls out on that limb and he pushes back the leaves and he begins to strain to see the face of Jesus. Why does he want to see the face of Jesus? Because, friends, Zacchaeus was a man who knew how to read faces. Friends, with just one look, Zacchaeus knew if a man was broke or if he was wealthy, if he was confident or if he was shaken, if he was powerful or if he was weak. Zacchaeus was a man who knew how to read faces. But when he looked into the face of Jesus on that day, he saw a face unlike any he had ever seen. It was both powerful and magnetic, personal and compassionate. It was a face that drew him in, and it was a face that would not let him go. And so he watched every glance and he tracked every step until Jesus literally walked underneath his tree. And when he did, Jesus looked up. And he said in verse 5, Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay in your house today. Friends, can you imagine? I mean, if you're Zacchaeus, can you imagine how you would have felt at that very moment? I mean, this is Jesus, God in the flesh. If he actually walked into this room right now, if you walked into this room and he walked up to you right now and looked you in the face and called you by name, how would you feel? Zacchaeus must have been thinking, I can't believe this. He knows me. He knows me. He knows my name. Friends, hear this. The same Jesus who knew Zacchaeus knows you. He knows you, and he knows me, and he knows everything there is to know about us. Everything. Author Joy DeKalb Clark writes that when she was growing up, she used to help her dad feed and care for 50 or so cows that they had. They milked them every day. And she said as he milked the cows, my dad would take this old wheelbarrow over to the grain chute, if you know what that is. That's where they keep the grain, it kind of shoots out, so it's called a grain chute. And then she would follow him as they fed their cows. 3 scoops to some, 2 to others, and 1 to still others. And she said it always really bothered me, and I felt really sad when some cows would get more than other cows. And so one day I asked my dad, I said, Dad, why do you give some cows so much and some so little? And with that, her dad just smiled and just kind of matter-of-factly said, because I know their needs. And I know my cows. Well, not satisfied with that answer, she said, but how do you know? How do you know which ones get what? Stopping for a moment, he turned to her and he said, because I know my cows. Some are going to have babies, and so they need more. Some have already had babies, and so they need more so the calves can have good, rich milk. Some cows are older, others are regular milk cows. And then he handed her the scoop, and he said, Joy, would you like to feed the cows? And she said, I happily took that scoop and continued down the manger. And my dad kept telling me exactly how many scoops of grain to give to each one. She said he never had to stop and think about it. He never hesitated. He never wondered. He just knew. He just knew. Friends, hear this. Jesus knows you. He knows you. You don't have to explain your circumstances. You don't have to inform Him about your needs. You don't have to tell Him about your secrets, even your deep, dark, hidden secrets, because He knows. He knows you better than you know yourself. When Zacchaeus realized that Jesus knew him and that He knew everything about him, even his deepest, darkest secrets, I imagine that tree must have quivered. And yet, in spite of all that he knew about Zacchaeus, Jesus wanted to go home with him. Don't miss this. In spite of all that Jesus knew about Zacchaeus, He wanted to go home with him. Friends, here's the good news. The same Jesus who wanted to go home with Zacchaeus wants to go home with you. And He wants to go home with me. In spite of everything He knows about us, and He knows it all. He knows our deepest and darkest hidden secrets. He knows it all. And yet He still wants to go home with us. Why? Hear me. Because when our days on earth are done, He wants us to go home with Him. Jesus said, in my Father's house, there are many rooms. If it were not so, would I have told you that I go to prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again, so that where I am, and take you to myself, so that where I am, you will be also. Friends, hear this. When our days on earth are done, Jesus wants us to go home with Him. Forever. Forever. Now, how does Zacchaeus respond when he finds out that Jesus wants to go home with him? How does he respond? Well, friends, I believe that if you could have put a stethoscope on that tree, you would have heard his heart pounding. Absolutely. Verse 6, Zacchaeus came down at once, welcomed him gladly. He welcomed him. Friends, he's pumped. He's pumped. I mean, all he wanted to do, think about this, all he wanted to do, all he thought he would be able to do is maybe see Jesus pass by. He never dreamed that Jesus would actually want to go home with him. And so he jumps out of the tree and he welcomes Jesus, and then Jesus, I believe, puts his arm around Zacchaeus down here. And they walk away. Now, think about this one. How does everybody else in Jericho respond to this unbelievable scene? Yeah. They found it unbelievable. Verse 7. All the people saw this and they began to what? Mutter. They began to mutter. They can't believe this. Jesus has gone home but to be the guest of a sinner. A sinner. Friends, they're shocked, they're horrified, they're ticked. They do not understand. I mean, they offered Jesus everything, literally. They offered Him the best they had to give, their best food, their best housing, their best hospitality. They have offered Him everything, but He turns it down to go home with a sinner. Friends, they don't understand. I mean, didn't Jesus come for us that are oppressed by tax collectors like this? Didn't he come for the least, the last, and the lost, and the lonely of us? Didn't Jesus come for us? Yeah, he did. Yes, he did. But hear this, he also comes for the oppressors. He also comes for the dictators. He also comes for the tyrants. He also comes for the tax collectors and the prostitutes, and hear me, sinners just like you and just like me. Jesus came for all people. All people. How about you? Do you have friends who don't want to go to church? Do you have friends who don't identify themselves as Christ followers? Do you have friends like Zacchaeus that no respectable person would want to be around? Do you have friends like that? If not, I got to ask you a question. Why not? Why not? Jesus did. Hear me. Jesus did. Are you his follower? Do you want to be like Jesus? If so, friends, do you have friends? Do you have friends that no respectable person wants to be around? If you do you eat with them? Do you spend time with them? How much time? Do they come to your house? Do you go to their house? Jesus, hear this, was called a friend of sinners. A friend of sinners. What are you called? What are you called? What am I called? Now, between verses 7 and 8, there's a time lapse. In that time lapse, Jesus goes to Zacchaeus' house. Now, precisely all that Jesus says and precisely all he does in the privacy of Zacchaeus' house, we don't know. What we do know is this. Through Jesus' life of love and grace, and through his words of truth and forgiveness, Zacchaeus exited that time standing taller than he had ever stood before. Verse 8. Zacchaeus stood up. And he said to the Lord, "Look, Lord, here and now I give you half of my possessions, half to the poor. And if I've cheated anybody out of anything, I'll pay back 4 times the amount." Friends, hear this. Hear this. When salvation truly comes to your house and mine, it affects the way you and I love and treat others. Let me say that again. When salvation truly comes to your house, it affects the way that you love and treat others. In other words, when you truly love God, hear this, when you truly love God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, then you're going to love your neighbor as yourself. And so the big question becomes, who's your neighbor, right? Well, Jesus already answered that question, and he says it's everybody. Hear me. Everybody you love, everybody you hate, everybody in between. Everybody is your neighbor. And so when you love everybody as you would yourself, then you'll know that salvation has come to your house. Then you'll know. In verse 8, we see 2 evidences that salvation truly has come to Zacchaeus' house. First, when true salvation came to Zacchaeus' house, it affected his giving. It affected his giving. He said, "Lord, here and now, I give half of my possessions to the poor." Half. Let me ask you something. How much do you give to the poor? How much do you give to the poor? I've been wrestling with this all week long. How much do you give? Do you give half of all your possessions? He does. Do you remember how the rich young ruler denied himself the opportunity to experience eternal life? He denied himself the opportunity. Remember how he did it? What happened? He was unwilling to give his money to the poor. In essence, he said, "You know what? If it's a toss-up between eternal life and keeping my money, I'm going to keep my money." In Luke 21, Luke records the story of a poor widow, right? Jesus is in the temple with his disciples, and he looks, and standing in front of the temple treasury, hear me, standing in front of the temple treasury, not to receive, but to give her last 2 coins, is a poor widow. She comes to give her last 2 coins. Friends, when true salvation comes to your house, it affects your giving, because true salvation affects your love for God and your love for others. Second, when true salvation came to Zacchaeus' house, it produced restitution. Restitution. Friends, when true salvation came to Zacchaeus, what did he do? He went far beyond the required restitution of his day. You see, by law in that day, he was only required to pay back the original value of what he took plus 1/5% of that total. That's it. But when true salvation came to Zacchaeus' house, what did he do? He willingly pays back 4 times the amount. 4 times the amount of what he took from others. Why? Because he's willing to do whatever it takes to make things right. Whatever it takes. Friends, when you are truly saved, God gives you a different value system. He gives you His value system, and it's about making things right with God and with others. That's the value above all values. Why? Because God's kingdom is a kingdom of righteousness. It's a kingdom of right relationships, right relationship with God and right relationship with others. And so friends, if you're a citizen of God's kingdom, and if you're not right with God, and if you're not right with others, and if you don't care about that, then friends, that's a signal that you have a serious, serious heart problem. 1 John 4:29 says, if anyone says, I love God, but hates his brother, hear this, he's a liar. A liar. For anyone who does not love his brother who he has seen cannot love God whom he has not seen. Friends, when true salvation comes to your house, it produces a desire for restitution in your life. You want to make things right with God, and you want to make things right with others. And then, as Jesus sees these evidences in Zacchaeus' life, he declares in verse 9, today salvation has come to this house. Today salvation has come to this house. Friends, catch this. How did Zacchaeus, think about it, how did salvation come to Zacchaeus? How does that salvation come to Zacchaeus? Jesus brought it. He brought it. That's how it came. Jesus brought it. And once Jesus brings salvation to Zacchaeus' house, what does Zacchaeus do? He shares it. He gives it away. He begins to make things right with God and others. Why? Because God has made things right with him. Salvation has come to his house. Friends, when salvation comes to Zacchaeus' house, verse 9 says, Jesus declares that Zacchaeus is a son of Abraham. A son of Abraham. Now, what in the world is a son of Abraham? Friends, it's simply this. It's a person who walks by faith. It's a person who walks by faith. When God called Abraham in Genesis 12:1 to leave his country and to leave his father's family and go to a place that God would show him, he didn't know where he was going. When that happened, Abraham literally had no idea where God was going to lead him. None. But hear this, he ends up going on the greatest adventure of his life. And the same thing is true with Zacchaeus. When Zacchaeus has salvation come to his house, he has no idea where God is going to lead him. I mean, he doesn't know he's going to start giving all this stuff away. He doesn't know he's going to start making things right with other people. He doesn't know that. What he knows is he wants to follow Jesus. And it takes him on the greatest adventure of his life. And now finally, we come to what many consider to be the theme verse. Here, this is the theme verse of the entire Gospel of Luke. The theme verse, Luke 19:10. And friends, hear this. If 1/4 of us as a Life Church, if 1/4 of us really believed this, if we really acted on this, if we would truly grab a hold of it and we would not let it go, then by God's grace and God's glory, we would turn this valley, this state, and this nation upside down for Christ. Friends, as Jesus leaves Jericho, this is his last word. He's on his way up to Jerusalem. He's on his way up to the cross. And he says, this is it. You are never going to hear my voice in this place again. Never again. This is it. And so if you don't remember anything else about me, remember this. The Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost. That's why I came, he says. I came to seek and to save the lost. Heartland Community Church in Lawrence, Kansas understands this. Let me explain with an article that's called Cold Drinks Warm hearts greet Manson fans. And there should be a pic of Manson up there in a second. Charles, excuse me. Do we have Manson? Thank you. Thanks, Leah. Isn't he beautiful? The article says, what would you do if shock rocker Marilyn Manson, the Bible-tearing, makeup-wearing, lots of swearing rabble-rouser behind the Antichrist superstar, decided to kick off his latest tour by playing a small club across the alley from your church? Imagine it's right there at the next building. Well, the congregation of Heartland Community Church in Lawrence, Kansas had just 4 days to come up with the answer to that very question. And they did. Tattoos, chains, blue hair, goth makeup, as 650 diehard Manson fans stood in line before the show, music played. Christian music. The Heartland band and the vocal team had made a joyful noise that was now pouring out of that church's back doors and into the alleyway. And then it says about an hour before the showtime, church members began emerging carrying coolers filled with cold pops. And they said, as they passed them out, we're from the church next door. We knew you'd be standing in line today, and we thought you might be thirsty, and so here you go. No bitterness, no antagonism, just stunned appreciation from the concert goers. Some who, from the very first time, were getting a taste of Christianity. They weren't poisoned by Manson's bitter lyrics. Pastor Paul Gray said, while we don't condone Manson's actions or attitudes, Christ died for all people. We're all just sinners who need a Savior. And we felt that Manson and his fans needed to experience Christ's love in a simple, tangible way. In a simple, tangible way. Friends, who in your life right now needs to experience Christ's love in a simple, tangible way? Who are the people where you live, work, study, and play who need to see Jesus in you? Who are the people that you are literally being called by God to bless? Who are the people that you're called by God to begin to pray for? Who are the people that you're listening to? Who are the people that you're eating with? Who are the people you're serving and sharing Christ's story and your story with? Who are those people? Who are you called to bless where you live, work, study, and play? Friends, hear this. It does not have to be some great big crusade. These are just little pops. It's just got to be real. It's just got to be authentic. And just got to be from your heart. Friends, hear me. If you love Jesus, you're going to end up loving what He loves. And you're going to end up doing what He did. And He came to seek and to save the lost. That's what He did. That's why Zacchaeus, long after Jesus had passed through Jericho, was still telling his story. He was still telling the story of the day he met Jesus. What's your story? What's your story of the day you met Jesus? And who are you telling it to? Who are you telling it to? Let's pray. God, thank you for your amazing love. Your amazing love that sees us just for who we are and all the fullness of who we are and all our dark and, Lord, dreadful sin. You see us just for who we are, and yet you love us. You want to go home with us. You want to live with us. God, thank you. For love we don't completely understand. But for those of us who have opened our hearts to it, we have been overwhelmed by it. And we give you thanks and we give you praise for it. And all God's people. I want to give us 3 more ways to respond. 3 more ways. Another one is to actually go to our website. If you want to be able to pray and you want to have somebody be able to pray with you,
We check that website every single day. There's a prayer wall on that website. Please go there. And please lift those prayers up on that website so we can join you in praying. Another way for you and I to respond to this God who loves us and cares for us is to give back to Him with our time and our talents and our treasures. And so if you want to be able to do that, there's two ways to do that. One is to go online to the website. You can give there. Or you can give by check and send it to Life Church of the Northwest Valley, and the rest of the addresses there on the screen before you. And then the last way to respond is this, is to go. It's to go out into the world and look for ways to bless other people. Be blessed. Begin with prayer. Begin with prayer for the people and the places where you actually live, work, study, and play. That's why God placed you in those places. That's why He's placed you among those people, to begin to pray for them. And then listen to them, hear their story, get to know who they are, eat with them, go deeper. You might do it by doing a cup of coffee or taking a walk or going to a thrift shop. I don't care how it's done, but go deeper with them. And as you do that, as you pray for them and listen to them and go deeper with them, you're going to have opportunities to serve them, because you're going to hear what their needs are. You're going to find opportunities to serve them. And as you serve them, there's going to be opportunities to share your faith, to share your relationship with Jesus with them, so that they can begin to understand what it might mean for them to have a relationship with Him. And so share your story and God's story. Now as you go, I want to invite you what I invite you into every single week, and what God invites you and me into every single moment of every single day, to live like Jesus and to love like Jesus and to share His message absolutely everywhere we go. Because when you and I do that, it brings life to our family, to our friends, to our neighbors, and to our world. God bless you as you bless others.